They called him Sir at the VA clinic. But at the family table, his name wasn't even on a napkin. He sat 3 feet away, and still, no one looked his way. What does it cost a family to forget the one who carried their name through fire? It was a Sunday in early spring. The kind of day where the sunlight tries to soften old things but doesn't quite reach. The house was louder than usual, laughter, footsteps, casserole dishes clinking on ceramic counters. Eli stood near the doorway, just out of frame, adjusting the collar of a coat too warm for April. A photo of Vanessa still hung crooked above the fireplace. No one touched it. One of the children asked who brought the folding chairs. Someone answered, Marcus did. But it was Eli who unlocked the garage. No one corrected it. Nicole passed him once, holding a tray of deviled eggs, her eyes moving past his as if skimming a menu. When her elbow brushed his arm, she said, "Oh. Sorry, sir," then walked on. Not Uncle Eli. Just Sir. Like he was a guest at someone else's gathering. He looked down at the floor, then up at the ceiling fan turning slow above them all. Still no one asked him how he was holding up. Not even today. Not even on her day. Eli stayed near the sliding glass door, his hand resting lightly on the frame, not quite opening it, not quite stepping away either. The noise from the backyard filtered in laughter, chairs dragging on concrete, someone shouting about overcooked ribs. The breeze brought the scent of charcoal and store-bought coleslaw. He stayed inside. His coat still hung over one arm. No one offered to take it. A paper plate sat on the edge of the counter, 2 deviled eggs, a spoonful of green beans, and a square of cornbread he hadn't touched. The lemonade was sweating beside it, a ring of water spreading across the tile. He stood near it, but not close enough to eat. When Marcus Barnes Jr. walked in from the deck, he glanced at Eli, gave a slight nod, then turned to the fridge. He pulled out a 6-pack and walked back out without saying a word. The door didn't close all the way behind him. Eli reached out, pushed it gently until the latch clicked. Then pulled his hand back, slow, like he'd touched something hot. Nicole walked through a moment later, holding her toddler on one hip and balancing a tray in the other. She looked at Eli, smiled faintly, polite, distant, and asked, "Could you move a little, Uncle?" She didn't wait for the answer. He did move. 1 step to the left. His shoes barely made a sound on the floor. They used to ask him to carve the ham, back when Vanessa was alive. Now the knife stayed in the drawer. It wasn't his kitchen anymore. The TV in the living room was showing a ball game, muted. A man on screen stood during the national anthem, hand over heart. Eli's eyes lingered on that hand. Wrinkled, strong. Probably still saluted, even if no one asked him to. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. His knee gave a small protest, but he didn't sit. There were chairs, but none that faced the window. And Eli preferred the light. A young man, someone's cousin or boyfriend, asked from the hallway, "Who's the old guy?" The question wasn't whispered. The answer came from Nicole's husband, a shrug and a laugh. "That's Eli. Used to be a driver in the army or something." The word landed like a coat dropped in mud. Driver. Not staff sergeant. Not Bronze Star. Just a man who held a wheel. As if steering through mortar smoke in Kandahar meant delivering pizzas. Eli blinked, once. Not fast. Just enough to let the sting settle without spilling over. He took 1 sip of the lemonade. It had gone warm. He set it down, but his fingers held on a second too long. Then he let go. No one asked if he needed anything. And he didn't ask either. The hallway light flickered overhead, one of those soft yellow bulbs that never quite brightens the room. Elijah stood at the edge of the dining area, holding his plate now, though it was still untouched. The voices from the backyard had dimmed, replaced by clinks of silverware and the buzz of small conversations moving inside. Nicole stood by the kitchen island, arranging more paper plates. She barely looked up when she said, "Uncle Eli, we've been meaning to talk to you about the house." Her tone was careful. Practiced. The kind of voice people use when reading rules they didn't write. Marcus Jr. stepped in behind her, leaning against the fridge, arms folded. His eyes didn't leave Eli. "It's too much for you now, that place," he added. "You know that. And we've been thinking it might be better if we helped manage it." Eli's hand paused above the plate, a plastic fork hovering, unsure what it was supposed to do. "It's not like we'd push you out," Nicole said, quickly. "You could stay, for now. But the title, we should probably move it over. Just to make things smoother." There was no mention of the mortgage he'd paid off. The foundation he'd poured with his own hands, the summer Vanessa had miscarried and they still built anyway. Just the word title. Like it was a formality. Eli looked at Nicole. She didn't meet his eyes. The only sound was the slow churn of the old dishwasher. A soft hum. Steady, indifferent. "You're not driving anymore," Marcus Jr. said. "Not working. You've got, what, just that little VA check? If anything happens to you, everything gets stuck in probate. We're trying to be smart about this." A napkin slid off the counter. Nicole picked it up, refolded it. Still no eye contact. Eli placed the plate down, but his fingers stayed on the rim. His thumb pressed into the styrofoam, just enough to leave a dent. "I paid for that house," he said, quietly. "Vanessa picked every tile in that kitchen." Nicole shifted her weight. "We know. But, you know how family gets divided when there's no paperwork. We're just trying to protect what's ours." Ours. The word sat heavy. Not cruel, just final. Like someone had drawn a line and didn't realize it ran right through him. From the living room, the child's voice rose, some cartoon blasting on the TV, a laugh track following it. None of it touched this room. Eli stepped back. His heel bumped the cabinet behind him, barely audible. His posture stayed upright, but his shoulders no longer held. Marcus reached for a drawer, pulled out a folded document, slid it across the counter. "Just think about it," he said. "It's already drafted. Makes it easy." Eli didn't touch it. His eyes stayed on the document a moment too long, then shifted away. Not to them. Just away. In the corner of the kitchen, a magnet on the fridge held a photo from 2 Thanksgivings ago. Everyone smiling on the porch. Eli had taken that photo. He wasn't in it. Now he wasn't in this, either. Nicole added, almost as an afterthought, "We'll make sure your name's still included. You'll always have a place." But she said it while turning away, already moving on to plastic cups and paper towels. And Eli didn't answer. He just picked up his coat again, even though he hadn't yet left. The porch light was still on, casting a tired glow across the sidewalk. Eli stood there, one foot still inside the doorway, the other resting on the first concrete step. He hadn't said a word since the papers. Since Nicole called the house hours and Marcus handed him a pen without asking. Behind him, the living room hummed with a low TV and the kind of laughter that doesn't carry warmth. The kind used to fill time. Nicole emerged from the hallway, holding a folded blanket. She extended it to him like an offering, but her hands didn't move past the frame of the door. "It gets cold out there at night," she said. "And Marcus and I need to make space for the kids. Just until we get things sorted." Eli took the blanket, more out of instinct than need. The fabric was soft and used. Still smelled like detergent. He looked down at it for a long moment. Then up just enough to catch her eyes before she looked away. "I won't be trouble," he said, voice steady. "I can stay in the garage. I built it strong." Nicole shifted her stance. "It's not about trouble," she murmured. It's just not the same anymore, Uncle." That was true. But hearing it said aloud, without pause, without struggle, landed somewhere deep. Not like a blow, but like a slow door closing with no one on the other side. Marcus appeared behind her. "We packed a few things for you," he said, not unkindly. "Your meds, coat, boots." Nikki thought of everything. Eli stepped fully out onto the porch now. He adjusted his collar. There was no bag waiting, just a cardboard box by the stairs sealed with care but no ceremony. Marcus handed over an envelope. "There's some cash. Not much, but it'll get you through the weekend." Eli didn't reach for it. He only nodded once. The kind of nod that means I heard you but not necessarily I accept. Down the block, a street lamp buzzed faintly. A neighbor's wind chime knocked against itself with the breeze. Nicole stepped forward, kissed the side of his cheek, quick, rehearsed. "I'm sorry," she said, just above a whisper. But she didn't wait for an answer. The door was already half closed when she turned back inside. Eli descended the steps slowly, his knees stiff from the chill and years of kneeling on gravel. He bent to lift the box, too light for its size. Something about that felt louder than anything said that night. He didn't look back. The door clicked shut. Not slammed, not locked. Just shut. The porch light went off. The church was quiet that morning. Not in the sacred way, but in the kind that made footsteps sound louder than usual. Eli arrived early, as he always had. He sat 3 rows from the back, near the aisle. The folded coat in his lap was pressed, the same one Vanessa once patched at the elbow with hands steadier than his would ever be again. He didn't look around. He didn't need to. He knew the eyes. Some familiar, others newer, younger, unsure whether to nod or pretend not to see him. He didn't press. He was here for the service. Not for closure. Near the front, Nicole sat with Marcus and their 2 sons, all in coordinated suits. Her back was straight. The kind of posture that tries to forget something is off. Eli stayed in the shadows. Not hiding, just not stepping forward where he wasn't welcome. But then the pastor called his name. "Before we begin today's memorial, we'd like to honor someone who's been with this community longer than most of us have been alive." Heads turned. Eli didn't move. He thought maybe someone else shared the name. Staff Sergeant Elijah Barnes. A few murmurs. One audible whisper, "Isn't that?" Nicole turned slightly, eyes locking with his for just a breath. It wasn't invitation. It wasn't rejection either. Just recognition. The pastor stepped off the stage with a small box. Inside, a medal. Not one Eli asked for. Not one he'd expected. Just a quiet commendation voted on by the town Veterans Board. For service. For integrity. For years of volunteering when no one else showed up for cleanup days, flag replacements, or youth mentoring. The pastor handed it to him in front of everyone. No microphone. No long speech. Just, thank you for never walking away. Even when others did. Eli nodded once. His fingers curled slightly around the edge of the box. Then a rustle at the back. A uniform army dress blues. Young man. Straight posture. Medal on his own chest. Tyrone Harris. He walked up the aisle without pause. Stood beside Eli, gave a slow, deliberate salute. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't performative. It was owed. No one clapped. That was the strange, respectful thing about it. Nicole didn't rise. But her younger son did, 10 years old, maybe 11. He stood up beside the pew. Looked at Eli like children do when they sense truth adults won't name. Then sat back down, slowly. Outside, after the service, Eli didn't linger. He adjusted his coat, held the medal gently in one hand. Tyrone walked beside him. You all right, Staff Sergeant? Eli glanced over. That's a good question, he said. They walked in silence a few steps. You got somewhere to be? Tyrone asked, finally. Eli shook his head. Just not going back to where I came from. Tyrone nodded like he understood more than Eli had said. I got a place. It's not big. But the couch is better than concrete. Eli stopped at the curb, looked up at the changing sky. Not grateful. Not surprised. Just quiet. He got in the passenger seat without another word. Back in the church parking lot, Marcus stood beside Nicole. Watching. The pastor said something to them neither of them seemed ready to answer. Nicole looked down at her son, who was still facing the door Eli had exited through. He asked, was that really Grandpa Eli? Nicole didn't reply right away. Then softly, he's just Eli. The boy tilted his head. He looked like someone important. No one corrected him. The house on Elm Street wasn't big, but it held its silence well. Tyrone had cleared out the guest room and extra space that once stored his father's old tools. Now, it had a modest bed, clean sheets, and a lamp with a soft golden hue. Eli had unpacked nothing. His duffel remained zipped at the foot of the bed. He didn't plan to stay long. He just didn't know where to go next. The next morning, Tyrone went to work, and Eli sat by the window, watching a robin peck at the ground under the oak tree. He hadn't seen a robin in weeks. They didn't come around where he'd been sleeping before. By noon, his phone buzzed. A text. From the bank. Your joint account access has been updated. He stared at it. Then tapped to log in. Access denied. He tried again. Session timed out. He called the customer service line. A polite voice told him the account ownership had been transferred, citing a family reassignment authorization submitted days earlier. Proper documents. Proper signatures. But not his. He hung up slowly. Then checked the lockbox. The one where he kept Vanessa's will, tucked between a letter she'd once written and a church program from their last anniversary. The key was still on the shoelace around his neck. He opened it on the small kitchen table. The documents were untouched, but the words on them now rang hollow. Later that afternoon, Tyrone returned home to find Eli sitting outside, hands resting on the railing, the dog tags catching the last of the day's light. He didn't speak right away. Tyrone waited, then sat beside him. "They moved the money," Eli said quietly. "Everything she left. It's gone from me now." Tyrone didn't ask who they were. He knew. The same they who smiled in photos. The same they who once invited Eli to Christmas before the seats at the table grew fewer, more strategic. Eli glanced down at his hands. Not just the account. They shut off the insurance too. Canceled the VA caregiver access. He let out a breath, not quite a sigh. "It's like I vanished. And someone made it official." Inside the house, the clock ticked. Outside, wind shifted the leaves without much sound. Tyrone leaned forward. "You're not gone, Sarge. Just misplaced for a bit." Eli didn't nod. Just tapped his fingers once on the wooden rail, like checking for something solid that had once been there. That evening, Nicole sat in her home office, staring at her computer screen. A message blinked, "Primary access removed." She refreshed. Still there. She called Marcus. "You changed the permissions?" Her voice was even. "I thought we agreed," he started. "We didn't," she cut in. There was a pause on the line. "Then, he doesn't need access to that stuff anymore. He's not even part of this household now." Nicole looked over at her son, sitting on the floor building something with Legos. He was humming to himself. Quiet, peaceful. She said nothing more. Just ended the call. Back at Tyrone's house, Eli stood in front of the bathroom mirror. He didn't shave. Just ran a warm cloth over his face. Stood there a long moment. The man looking back at him didn't seem angry. Just thinner around the edges. Faded in places. He picked up the folded flag from the corner chair. Held it with both hands. Not to hold on to it, but to remember how to. In the living room, Tyrone was typing something on his laptop. VA documents. Complaint forms. Power of attorney disputes. There were paths to correct what had happened. But they were slow. Bureaucratic. And mostly silent. Eli didn't stop him. But he didn't help either. He just stood by the window again, the robin now gone, the wind turning colder. The morning sun stretched across the small yard, cutting thin lines through the blinds. Eli sat at the edge of the bed, boots laced but unmoving. The dog tags rested against his chest, cold as stone. He'd been up for hours, but hadn't moved past that spot. The air in the room was still. Quiet. Tyrone had left early, leaving behind a note on the table with half a bagel and black coffee. Nothing fancy. But it sat there, untouched. Eli read the note once. Then folded it, slowly, like he was tucking away something fragile. By late morning, he stepped out onto the porch. The neighborhood was calm. A delivery truck down the block. A woman walking her dog across the street. No one looked his way. And maybe that was a small mercy. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a folded envelope. Nicole's name written in his hand. The same hand that had once held her when she took her first steps. He stared at it, then slid it back. He didn't knock on her door, didn't drive across town. He just stood in the stillness, letting the weight of choice settle into his shoulders. A few blocks over, a church bell rang. Noon. Eli turned and walked back inside. Not quickly. Just enough to leave the wind outside. He found the laundry folded on the couch, Tyrone's shirts, a towel, a single sock missing its pair. He sat beside the stack, stared at the fabric for a long moment, then started folding the towel again. Not because it needed it, but because his hands needed something to do. That evening, as Tyrone returned, he found Eli in the kitchen, stirring a pot. Nothing elaborate, just stew. Simple. The kind Vanessa used to make when winter was settling in. Tyrone paused at the doorway. No words. Just a glance. Eli nodded once, barely noticeable. Later, after dinner, Tyrone brought over the paperwork. VA forms. Financial restitution documents. Legal pathways. Eli looked at them. Then back at Tyrone. "I'm not signing," he said softly. Tyrone didn't argue. He waited. "I thought I would," Eli added. "I really did. But it's not the kind of war I came home to fight." Tyrone didn't nod. He just sat back, eyes on the lamp in the corner. "They'll think they won," he said after a pause. Eli looked down at his hands. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe they'll have to live with what they did. And I'll live with what I didn't." The room went quiet again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full with restraint. With a different kind of strength. One that didn't swing or shout. One that didn't need to be seen to stand tall. That night, as the house settled into darkness, Eli stepped outside once more. The stars were dim, but they were there. And in the hush of it all, he whispered something only the night could hear. It wasn't forgiveness. But it wasn't fury either. The morning that followed was quiet, the kind that didn't ask anything of you. Just sunlight on the windowsill and the slow creak of a wooden floor under bare feet. Eli stood in the kitchen, pouring hot water over tea leaves. Not coffee today. Something gentler. The steam rose slowly, catching the light. He walked out to the porch, cup in hand, wearing the same coat he always did, brown, worn, but clean. The air was crisp. A truck rumbled in the distance, and a lawn sprinkler ticked somewhere to the left. He sat on the steps, not looking at anything in particular. Just breathing, like the morning had asked him to stay a while. Tyrone joined him, wordless, holding a manila envelope under one arm. He didn't offer it. Just sat. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then, quietly, Tyrone reached down and unwrapped the envelope, sliding out a folded American flag. Eli's flag. Pressed, sharp at the corners. It had been kept well. Better than most things people call belongings. Eli didn't reach for it. He simply looked. "That yours now?" he asked, voice even, almost soft. "No, sir," Tyrone replied. "Just making sure it doesn't end up forgotten." Eli nodded, once. That was enough. Later, they drove. Not far, just to a clearing near the veteran cemetery, where wildflowers still grew in patches and the wind didn't carry as many names. Eli didn't speak during the ride. He kept one hand resting on the window's edge, his eyes tracking fences, trees, the occasional crow on a pole. When they arrived, Tyrone opened the trunk and handed Eli a small wooden box. Inside were three things: a faded photograph of Vanessa, a pressed flower she once kept in her Bible, and Eli's bronze star, still gleaming faintly under a layer of velvet. Eli knelt on the grass, not from pain, not from duty, just to be level with the earth again. He placed the box gently down, opened it, and then closed it again, slowly, like closing the last page of something worth rereading. And then, with nothing dramatic, he stood. Not straighter. Not prouder. Just enough. They walked back in silence. That night, Eli returned home alone. Tyrone had stayed behind to make a call. Something about a grant for veterans. Something Eli might not need, but maybe someone else would. As the house dimmed into evening, Eli stood by the window. He watched the wind move through the trees and listened to the soft creak of old wood adjusting to the night. Then, slowly, deliberately, he took off his boots. He folded his coat. And for the first time in a long while, he let himself lie down on the bed, not just to rest, but to sleep. There was no grand gesture. No apology from the world. No crowd to clap. Only the quiet. And in that quiet, a man who had walked through storms, through fire, through the cold indifference of blood and kin, found something close to peace. Not because the world had changed, but because he had chosen not to carry it anymore. In the quiet dignity of Elijah Barnes, we're reminded that true strength doesn't always roar, it endures. He didn't fight back when he was humiliated. He didn't raise his voice when he was pushed aside by his own family. Instead, Eli chose a different kind of resistance, one rooted in stillness, honor, and grace. By revoking access without a word and turning toward service once more, he taught us that sometimes the deepest form of justice isn't revenge, it's peace. This story isn't just about a veteran wronged. It's about the courage to forgive when you've been forgotten. The power to rebuild when others tear you down. And the quiet kind of love that speaks louder than anger ever could. Have you ever chosen silence over retaliation and found strength in it? If this story moved something in you, please consider liking this video, sharing it with someone who believes in quiet courage, and subscribing to our channel, Black Veteran Stories, where we honor those who served and the silent battles they still face.